Great. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Phil Whitmer. He has been the past president of the Delaware Valley Ornithological Club. He has had a great connection with Wyncote Audubon. He was the facilitator for us to develop our current strategic plan, and did a great job with our board and with our certain of our stakeholders to be able to come up with a strategic plan that we are coming toward the end of, and we're going to need to revisit. Phil also is very involved as part of the Birdtown, Pennsylvania working group. He is a part of a group that I am associated with as well. And we have a great deal that has been developed under the Birdtown, Pennsylvania program. And this is part of it that Phil has had direct ownership and creative oversight of. The other thing is Phil has been a great partner with Bird Safe Philly. He's a member of the leadership group. Again, he represents the DVOC, one of the 5 founding members organizations of Bird Safe Philly, and been a very important contributor to the leadership and direction and effectiveness of Bird Safe Philly. And I don't know how many of you have gotten your Audubon magazine today. I have not yet, but I know people are receiving it. And the Audubon magazine, if you open it up, the lead story is Bird Safe Philadelphia, Bird Safe Philly. So today we're going to hear a good deal about something very important to Birdtown, Pennsylvania, and that is looking at the different kinds of programs to recognize all of us that are doing much more to convert our lawns and gardens around our homes and properties to native plant habitat for bugs, birds, and other creatures. So with that, Phil, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you, Lee. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I really am glad to have the opportunity to talk with you about 2 things. And one is Birdtown, Pennsylvania, which is a very interesting story. And it's an organization that is really just on the cusp of taking this program statewide so that all municipalities have the opportunity to become a bird town. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I'm also interested to talk to you about several different habitat recognition and certification programs. Now, we use the term recognition and certification because there are varying degrees of difficulty in terms of obtaining recognition from some of these organizations. For none of these do they send somebody out to your yard. So that doesn't happen. It's all based on trust and on what you report about your yard. And so in some ways they're recognition programs, and in some ways they're certification programs. So first, a little bit about Birdtown, Pennsylvania, and this is our mission. We work in partnership with local municipalities and other like-minded organizations to promote community-based conservation actions to create a healthier, more sustainable environment for birds, wildlife, and people. Of course, that means for a lot of places, it means working to reduce the amount of lawns that exist in that municipality, working to help educate people about the value of native plants, and providing resources to people like native plant sales and things like that, so that it encourages people to move in a direction that's going to help birds and not continue to take away habitat, healthy habitat that they have. So let me talk a little bit about the state of birds. I was very interested when Lee said this is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And so 1970 is a very key date in terms of what's happening with birds. And the reason for that being so important is that was, they took information on the population and status of birds, and it's been ongoing since 1970. And recently, that was all compiled into a report. And it was a report that showed that since 1970, in 50 years, we have lost 29% of our birds. That's a staggering amount. And you can easily see that if things continue the way they have gone since 1970, it won't be that long until we're struggling to find birds at all. Now, some birds have done okay. Generalist birds like house sparrows don't seem to have suffered too much, partly because they're so comfortable around human habitat. Woodpeckers, not quite sure why, but woodpeckers haven't suffered in terms of loss of numbers. But other birds like wood thrush, for instance, have lost a huge percentage of their population. And so we have a number of species that are at grave risk. And we think about what's going to happen in the future with climate change and with all of the other stresses that we have going on today. The picture does not look bright for birds moving forward. So what have we identified as being the reason why we've lost so many birds? And mostly it's the loss of habitat. Now, that doesn't always mean that habitat has been taken away, but it does mean that habitat has been degraded to the point where it's not valuable, excuse me, not valuable to sustain avian diversity. And I'm focusing right at the moment just on numbers of birds, but we'll see in a minute that it really has to do with other flora and fauna. So in our country, for instance, we have 40 million acres of lawn. Now, a lawn is a monoculture. It supports almost no insect activity that's valuable to other species. And so when a bird looks at a lawn, it's pretty much looking at a desert in terms of food, shelter, or water to sustain itself. Lawns have shallow roots, but very thick roots. And so what happens is that it forms a mat that's almost like concrete. And as our climate warms, warm air holds a lot more water. So there's a lot more rain in some places and less rain in other places. But when water hits those lawns, a very little bit gets absorbed, but most of it runs off. And when it runs off, it carries with it the pesticides and the fertilizers that have been put on that grass. And it carries them off into our streams and into our rivers and into our bays, and eventually it goes out to the ocean. And that's destroying that culture, that eco environment for many, many birds, for insects, and for many other living creatures. So Doug Tallamy, some of you may have heard of Doug Tallamy. Doug Tallamy is an entomologist. That means he studies insects. And he came upon the notion that native birds really depend on native insects. Over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, they have evolved with one another. And they've evolved, for instance, the monarch butterfly has evolved to be able to absorb the toxins that the milkweed plant has developed as a defense against being eaten. And so the monarch butterfly carries those toxins with it, and that acts as a defense against being eaten by a bird. So all of this is a web of connectedness between the plants and the insects and birds and living human beings. So Doug Tallamy's notion is that if we have 40 million acres of lawn, if we turn that lawn into habitat, we can create, the largest national park in the world by simply changing our habits from lawn to native plants. So it's going to require a new culture for landscaping. And that's what a lot of recognition programs are about. And so we are going to talk about those different recognition programs. And we're also going to talk about why have a sign on your yard that talks about, how you've gone about being recognized as a program. So we have a database on our website that houses 10 recognition programs. I'm sure there are more. I know there are some that we left out of the database. But the ones that we picked are well respected, and when you get a recognition from them, it really means something. For example, we've left out recognition programs which are really fundraisers for that organization, because they don't ask you to do anything. They say, just send us a check and we'll send you a sign. Well, that means you're not doing anything different in your yard. You're not creating a safe habitat for native plants, insects, and birds. You're just donating to the cause. There's nothing wrong with donating to the cause, but we want it, when you get recognition, we want to know that it's making a difference. So how are these programs different? They are often different in terms of their audience. Some of these programs are really directed toward birders, people who enjoy birds. Some are directed toward people who love butterflies. More specifically, some are directed toward some who love monarch butterflies. Also, what's different about these programs is the emphasis. So there may be a recognition program that focuses on the watershed. So if you're focused on the watershed, you're going to look at different things than if you're focused just on monarch butterflies. So the watershed is going to be much more involved with what do you do with the water that falls on your property? How are you trying to keep all of that water that falls on your property? Because if you don't keep it on your property, it flows off your property. And the way our suburbs are constructed and our cities are constructed, when it flows off your property, it's usually going into storm sewers, and it's carrying lots of bad chemicals and sediment with it, and it's not healthy for the watershed. Also, the more water that flows off of your property, just in terms of the volume, creates problems for streams and the rivers that associate with them. You know, after a very heavy rain, if you look at a stream or a river near you, first of all, it will be swollen. The banks, the height of the water gets very high. It's moving very fast, but also notice the color. The color is often brown. So rain runoff into the watershed shouldn't be brown. If it's brown, it means it's carrying soil with it. That means it's eating away at the banks of the streams and rivers that are in that watershed. The speed of the water moving means that it's eroding the banks much more quickly than it would in a natural situation. And so that's a worthy emphasis, and it's connected to what our purpose is, which is increasing habitat for birds. But it's a little bit different than a recognition program that really focuses on, well, we're going to plant plants that will attract birds. Another thing that's different about the programs is cost. Some of the programs are free, there's an application fee, and for some, you get a sign as a part of your application fee. In other places, the application may be free, but you have to pay for a sign, and so forth. So what links all of these programs? And I hinted at it. It's that they are all trying to support a healthy environment and healthy ecosystems that surround us. So if your focus is on monarch butterflies and you're planting lots of native plants and milkweeds and trying to have a diverse backyard that has lots of pollinators in it for the benefit of monarch butterflies, that kind of an environment also benefits birds, and the birds benefit the plants, and also benefit the insect world. So it's all linked together, and all of the programs, the recognition programs that we've selected, do things that make it healthier for birds. Some of the programs, when you get your property recognized, they will put a dot on the map. You know, they'll protect your address because you don't want people showing up at your door and saying, "Oh, I saw your dot on the map." But it gives you a sense of where that property is And it's a way to show in an area how many neighbors are able to get their properties recognized. And one of the reasons why that's so good is that we need to build a groundswell of support for these kinds of properties. And we need to get people to change how they do things. This particular map was taken from the National Pollinator Garden Network. So that's one of them. Now I say, let's dare to dream and imagine a community joined by thousands and thousands of properties that are recognized for creating bird-safe habitat, all working for a new paradigm to create for beautiful yards. The notion that a well-kept lawn and perfectly trimmed bushes, came out of the royalty in Europe that thought that was the essence of nature, was to get nature, it was for man to tame nature. And we've carried that with us into this country. So we have suburbs with manicured lawns and non-native bushes, all very neatly trimmed and so forth. So I sort of laugh to myself at my neighbors because I watch them pay somebody to cut the lawn once a week, whether it needs it or not. And I also see them then pay somebody to come fertilize the lawn once a week so that it needs to be cut once a week, whether it needs it or not. And then they get a nice, thick, almost artificial looking lawn, and fall comes along and all the leaves fall off the trees. So they pay somebody to come gather up the leaves and take them away so their lawn doesn't look unkempt. And then they pay them again to bring back those leaves in the spring as mulch. And so by doing all of this, we have gotten very far away from what nature wants to do. And so we need to change that paradigm and get people to plant native plants and leave the leaves. And why do we say that? The leaves, when they fall, they harbor lots of insects and future insects, the larvae of future insects are in those leaves. And when we break them all up and shred them or ship them off someplace to be composted, that insect life is lost. If we leave the leaves, those insects are intact there, and you can watch birds throughout the winter and into the spring, rummaging through those leaves and finding things to eat. So we have to change the paradigm about what's beautiful. We have to get everybody to pretend that they live in the woods, because they should live in the woods. And it's the woods and the insects and the native plants that create the habitat. And what I like to envision is that we get so many lawns and properties that are doing the right things to support native birds, that it provides corridors for birds that are migrating that are sort of a safe passage. Now, so imagine that we have here, this is the Philadelphia area. And you can see lots of green stuff, but I won't do it here because it takes me out to Google, and that's not a good thing right now. So, but when you actually zoom in on some of this stuff, it's not really forest. It's lawns with a few trees on them, and some of the trees are native and some of the trees aren't native. And so it's really not as green and hospitable as it looks from this satellite picture. Oh, see, took me out here anyhow. So let me see if I can just zoom in some of this. That looks to be blurry. It's not really resolving. Oh, here we go. It's taking a while to resolve. So you see, when you zoom in, there's farmland and trees here and there, but there's no contiguous forest, which is what a lot of birds really require to have safe habitat. So let me give you one example about that. A brown-headed cowbird is a bird. It's an obligate parasite. That means it doesn't, in this instance, it doesn't raise its own chicks. So the brown-headed cowbird will find the nest of a songbird and will lay its eggs in the nest of a songbird. So if the songbird doesn't recognize that that's a foreign egg, it raises that egg and that chick as if it were its own. And the cowbird chicks are very aggressive, so they outcompete the natural mother's chicks. Gets larger, quicker, and it's sad, but I've actually seen a female sparrow feeding a cowbird chick that was twice its size. It was kind of funny in one way, but sad to think that, okay, because of this parasitic behavior, that songbird is losing out. Well, brown-headed cowbirds are pasture birds. You know, they evolved following the herds of bison on the plains. And they don't like to go into deep woods. In fact, they'll only go in about 200 yards. But if you look here, there aren't any contiguous large sections of forest that would allow a songbird to nest there without it being at risk from a cowbird. Okay. Let me see if I can get back. Okay, here we are. So that's why we need to change those 40 acres of 40 million acres of lawn. We need to change that into bird habitat. So here are the 10 different programs. One is Audubon Mid-Atlantic Bird Friendly Habitat. The other is called Homegrown National Park, Monarch Watch, Monarch Way Station Program, National Wildlife Federation, National Pollinator Garden Network, North American Butterfly Association, Penn State Watershed Friendly Certification Program, Penn State Master Gardener Pollinator Garden Certification, Pollinator Pathway, and Xerces Society. So we created a tool on our website for assessing which program might be right for you and your yard to become recognized as good habitat. So if you go to our website, which is birdtownpa.org, and be careful that you use the full name exactly as it is here, because Birdtown used to be a program of the National Audubon State Office in Pennsylvania. And so you may get to that website if you just say Birdtown rather than birdtownpa.org. All right, so let's see if we can get out there. All right, so here is our website, and you'll come into home, but I've gone ahead and selected backyard habitat programs because this is where the database is for the different programs that we're talking about tonight. One of the things that we need to think about and talk about is that which program is going to be right for you, and also how do we get 1 yard that's habitat friendly into 20 yards that are habitat friendly? How do we get your neighbors to buy into what you're doing? And so why are certification programs important? It's important. It's certainly important for the birds that you have in your yard, but it's also important because it's a visible way to try to talk to your neighbors about what it is that you're doing. And I always sort of laugh about it. I say, well, by having those signs up there, it stops neighbors from thinking, what the heck are they doing down there with all those leaves on their yard and so on and so forth. So the signs are important. Also, if you've gone to the effort to change things in your yard to make it safer for birds and more productive for birds, you deserve to have some recognition for that. And so let your neighbors know that, hey, I've put some effort into this, and here's why I did. And you might be interested in doing the same thing. And if you are interested, I'll be glad to help you. So here is the database. And let's take Audubon Bird Friendly Habitat, because that's the first one. The emphasis is safe and healthy habitat for birds. It talks then about the requirements of the application. So you've got to fill out some demographic data on your property, the size, rural, suburban, what categories of a habitat, food, shelter, water, nesting. And in this case, you need to have at least 2 items in food and 1 in each of shelter, water, and nesting, and fill out an additional 19-question survey in order to qualify for that recognition. The benefits to you are that Audubon has many downloadable and interactive resources, including a website that's called Plants for Birds. And Plants for Birds is a terrific idea. So you go to National Audubon and you actually just Google Plants for Birds, and that will get you there. And you put in your zip code, and the zip code will then list plants that are native to your region, which is important that it be to your region, and in different categories like trees, shrubs, ground covers, and things like that. So if you're wondering, well, what plant should I plant to, build this habitat, that database can help you a lot. Now, why is it important that it be a plant native to your region? Well, two reasons really. One is that if it's a native plant for your region, it means that it's evolved with the amount of rainfall that you get, with the amount of sunlight that you get, with the temperatures that you get, winter, spring, summer, and fall. And so those plants are actually hardier than many non-native plants, and hardier than, say, plants that are native to Florida, and you plant it here and it does not do well in our neighborhood. I've seen people who have to wrap burlap or some other material around their shrubs because they're not native, and the winter would kill them if you didn't protect them. The other thing native plants are important, other reason why they're important, is that native plants tend to have deeper roots. And so once they become established, they don't need as much care as non-native plants. So that the native plant has evolved to have deep roots. It can pull water from deep in the ground. So if you're in an area that has a very wet spring, but then gets very dry in the summertime, the native plants are going to do better because they've got those deeper roots. They've evolved with having that pattern of wet and dry. Here's the one from Doug Ptolemy that I talked about him, as he's the entomologist. And I'm not going to go through all of these. You've just seen the structure of how we analyzed each of these. The website does have a nice feature, and that is that these, the icons, the pictures of the signs are also links to their application. So if you review the database, you say, this is the one for me. You click on the sign and it takes you right to the application. Okay, I would just point out quickly that this is a great website. There's lots of stuff on it. Here are resources on native plants, invasive plants, pesticides, and so on and so forth. It will list our partners. It will list which townships or municipalities are bird towns. There's a blog that you can follow, and so forth. And as we get further along, we will develop more and more resources to help support you and the bird towns in reaching our goals. All right, so let me get back here. And again, we want to build a network of recognized properties. So it doesn't really matter if your next door neighbor is a monarch way station and they're using all native plants and putting in a meadow and lots of pollinator plants because they want to support monarchs, but I want to support birds. It doesn't matter, because we're all doing the same kinds of things that are going to benefit the entire ecology. But how do we get some of these other people involved? And I thought of this logo, so if you love plants, love birds, we want to hear from you. Our hope is that we will get lots of people who have recognized property and pull them all together and talk to them about okay, so how do we even increase the numbers? How, maybe we want to have a training on how to approach your neighbors about this. And also, you can tell people, look, if you want to get your property recognized, you want to sign for your house, we'll help you do that. You might want to place announcements in municipal newsletters. We send out Birdtown communications, local newspapers. And as a long shot, we are going to try, some of us, to contact the sponsors of these programs. And we're not going to ask them for the email addresses of the people who've gotten recognized. We're going to ask them, because they probably wouldn't give that to us. But we're going to ask them, hey, how about, we're looking to connect all of these recognized programs in our municipality. Can you send something out to the people in your members in this zip code and let them know we're here and we're interested in talking to them? So we'll see how that goes. And if you start talking with other people who have recognized property, you may come up with a lot of other ideas yourself. Okay, this is just what I showed you on the website. In actuality, this is just a printed version of that. So I'm going to sort of zip right through this. Excuse me. Just for example, I noticed, see down at the bottom of this one, it says the free application, but the sign costs $57. So, okay. I'm going to stop sharing now and try to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, are we back?
Yes.
Kevin.
We're back. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, that was overwhelming. A lot of information to take in. So I work at the Pennypack Trust, and a lot of our mission aligns with everything you said tonight. So we did some presentations earlier this year, which I'll put in the chat box, called No Mow May, which is kind of going on with the global trend to not mow in May. That's kind of the short end of the stick, but there's a lot more to it. So if you guys want to check out that YouTube link I put in there, it goes a lot with what he does and what he's talked about tonight, but more of the practical, how to do this on your own kind of end. So if you're interested with everything he said tonight, the video I put in YouTube might help you out with that. Actually making your yard that way and then getting it certified. So thank you, Phil. That was really great and clarified a lot of the differences between the different programs and what worked best for different people. So thank you. I'll get to some of the questions here. The first question was, will this be recorded? I want to share it with my friends. That was from Donna. She didn't say share it with friends, but I think that's why she wants it. So I'm looking at Lee, and I think people want to know how they can get to the recording.
Yes, we record our programs and we put them on the Windcote YouTube, post them to the Windcote YouTube. So doesn't happen immediately, but it will get there.
Perfect. Thank you, Lee. I just want to make sure before I answer it wrong to all these people. And then the second question directed at Phil comes from Gret Long. He says, I registered some years ago in backyard bird habitats for a backyard habitat sign, but I'm not sure how to report what I am doing here. So he's asking more, what can he report on how he's doing with his sign?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question. So if you got your property recognized by one of these programs, you can post that sign, front and center in your yard, and that helps a lot. I mean, our property is obviously different than those of our neighbors. When you drive down the street, it's like a perfect green lawn, a perfect green lawn, a perfect green line, not much lawn at all, but a lot of leaves. And, in some places like in my township, people could report that and say, Phil's got this yard there that looks like it's dilapidated and it's an eyesore and so on and so forth. I'd rather have my neighbors know that I'm doing this on purpose, not because I'm lazy, because quite frankly, it's a lot more work to do what we've done to our property. But the sign gives me a one up, being able to say, sure, ask me about it. I'll tell you why our yard looks like this, and it's for a reason. I don't know if that answers the question, though.
He did have a comment later on that said, that's the sign I have, Audubon at home.
Okay.
So I don't know if that helps at all, but I think you might have answered his question. We'll see if he says anything in the chat box.
I would just add that if he wants to go farther, he can connect with the Audubon chapter that's close to him, and because most Audubon chapters are into this in a big way. So you might find people who are simpatico in that Audubon chapter, and you can move forward. If you're in Pennsylvania, you might even want to try to get a group of people to start, get your municipality registered as a bird town.
Awesome. Okay. I don't think he said anything else, so I think you answered his question. This next question comes from Grant West. It's not much of a question. I think it was a comment to something you said earlier on in the presentation, but I'll say it anyway. He says, does this mean you do not promote the Audubon at Home program?
Pennsylvania, the Mid-Atlantic, how far back do I go? The Pennsylvania state office merged with the Maryland and DC offices to become Audubon Mid-Atlantic. The original Birdtown program started as a program of Audubon, Pennsylvania, the state office of Pennsylvania. And they decided they could not afford, they didn't have the resources to support it. And that's what happened. There's a group of us, Lee being one of them, myself being another one. We formed the Birdtown Working Group, which is, we are re-energizing and supporting the Birdtown program. Now, all of that is a long way of saying that because the recognition program that started in Pennsylvania was a local program and not a national program, and it's still continuing as far as we know, and so you should be able to continue to get that recognition. Now, do we support the national Plants for Birds program, or Habitat for Birds program? I'm not even sure what it's called. My answer is no. And the reason is, I talked about these kinds of programs before. It's a fundraising thing. It's like you send them a check and they send you a sign. And it's not asking you to do anything differently in your yard. And so I wouldn't support that. I mean, I don't, if you want to give them money and get the sign, there's nothing wrong with it. except that if you're going to do that, you should be planting native plants in your yard.
If I can add to that, Phil, I'm
Please
presuming
do.
that Grant may be a part of the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, and they have one of the granddaddy certification programs that their chapter runs. And there are many chapters that run a chapter-specific program. I'm thinking of Bergen County Audubon in northern New Jersey. They have a certification program that is really devoted to their chapter territory in the region they serve. I think the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia does the same thing. So I don't think that in terms of your program, we were looking at all of the maybe some of the more local or regional programs that might be out there. We were looking more the more general programs that were there. So that's the difference, I think, with this website. I think the other thing I was going to indicate is that there's not and Phil, you correct me if I'm wrong, that one program is better than the other. And in fact, what we have begun to discover is there are people that might have 2, 3, 4 types of signs on their yard, that they don't just go with the Audubon Bird Habitat Recognition Program that was here in Pennsylvania, but they might have the monarch sign, they might have the National Wildlife sign as well. They enjoy being able to promote for their neighbors and for their communities that they are really working hard at the native habitat.
It's so bad we're thinking about forming a recognition signs anonymous group to help those people who are just addicted to getting more and more signs. I'm kidding. I don't think you can have too many signs. Any other questions?
I don't see any more questions. Actually, no, one more question come through. Other than native plants, what do you want to see people who live in HOA communities implement in their lawns? What types of things to help support bird habitat? That comes from Grant.
Okay, excellent question, Grant. And there is a section on the website that addresses HOAs, because that's a little trickier situation, because you've got to get all of the HOA and all of your neighbors on board with doing the same thing. So what most of a lot of the similarities between a lot of these programs are reducing or eliminating the use of pesticides, reducing or eliminating the use of fertilizers, creating rain gardens, or doing rain barrels, swales, planting native grasses as ways to keep water on your property and keep it from just running off into the storm sewers. Planting native plants. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to plant all native plants, 100% native plants, and anything else. But you have to have a substantial proportion of your plants to be native. And if you really get into it, you'll wind up wanting to create a variety of plants at a variety of heights. So for instance, you're going to want ground covers that are native. You're going to want to have some shrubs. You're going to have some understory trees that are native, and then some upper canopy trees. Birds habitat, they different species will, spend most of their time in different areas. For instance, large tree gets divided up where some are down closer to the ground, other birds are in the mid canopy, some other birds are in the upper canopy. There's a lot that you can talk about in terms of bird feeding and what you do with bird feeding. If you want to create safe habitat for birds, and so one of the things that happens if you're feeding birds, if you're providing lots of native plants that are going to provide food for birds through all of the seasons, you're going to get a lot of birds in your yard, and that's an unnatural situation, because you're attracting birds into your yard. And so you want to reduce any of the risks that are in your yard to birds. So you want to eliminate light pollution to the extent that you can on your property. You don't want lights on at night that are going to interfere with migration or interfere with insect activity. Birds are in serious decline. So are insects, and that's a scary thing. Where you place your feeders is important. You want to protect birds from your windows. Birds don't recognize glass as a hard surface. Humans don't do that either. It's just we pretty much learn as children what the cues are for what's likely to be glass. We see a frame around a sliding glass door. Aha, that's a cue. Birds don't get those cues, and so they either fly into the glass because they think they can fly through it and they don't see it, or they see the reflection of vegetation or a reflection of the sky in the window and they crash into that. And most birds who fly into windows die. So you better stop me because I could just keep going. When you get into it, there are a lot of things to learn, and it's actually a lot of fun to figure out how to make it safe.
Phil, I was just going to add for those folks that are on the on the call and in the meeting that are from other states. I want to make it clear that Pennsylvania is what we call a home rule state. That many of the laws that take effect for different kinds of things like native plants or weed ordinances and that kind of thing is done municipality by municipality. There are some things that can be done statewide, as far as that goes. But if there is going to be a bird town, one of the things they may be working on is to make certain that there is a native plant ordinance adopted. It might be part of the building code. That's some high percentage of the plants in any new development in the municipality must be native plants. That there's a review of weed ordinances so that if you go by Phil's yard, you don't think it's a garlic yard, and that in fact, you recognize that this is a habitat or a meadow being created, and it's not, nobody's getting cited or fined to help, to mow that lawn or mow it down. The question about HOAs, I know that some of our bird towns are working to really get some of the folks that are in the HOAs where they have some control over the plantings and the mowing practices that are in that HOA, that they can work to change the agreement among the residents in that particular community, that residential HOA, to be more bird friendly. That's a little bit more difficult, but it can happen. And I know there's in Upper Dublin that they've been doing that kind of work with some of the HOAs in that particular bird town. but it makes it a little bit more challenging. And I know that with Birdtown, Pennsylvania, there's an attempt to share ordinances, some workshops that are being done so that some of the different bird towns or others that are interested can see model ordinances that are being promoted and have them adopted in their own municipality and work toward those types of adoptions. So that's just a comment here, but Pennsylvania, I think, is one of the few states. There are a few others, but where, the hundreds, thousands of municipalities in the state each have a great deal of authority and jurisdiction over their own over their own municipality. It's not countywide. It tends to be municipality by municipality. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, Kevin, do we have any other questions?
No, I think that is the last of the questions that I can see. There were some other comments, but they just went along with your chat or agreed with what you were saying or thanked you for what you were saying. So that was the gist of it. Most of the people said, excellent presentation. Thank you for the great resources. I know this was personally helpful for the folks at the Pennypack Ecological Restoration Trust because it goes along with a lot of the presentations we've been doing, but a more official way to get signage and certification on their property.
Yeah.
But like you said, the gist of it is plant native plants, help
Yeah.
the birds, do it from the ground up, help the insects. Everybody can do it, I think was the main message, that at least I received. But then you can go all these other steps that will help you get resources and learn some more and get some good contacts and then make it more official with a nice sign and certification, which helps with a lot of different things. So
I did think of one other thing. I talked about Doug Ptolemy. And he actually counted the number of caterpillars that a chickadee pair needed to feed one clutch of birds. And I don't remember the exact figure, but it was in the range of 5,000 to 7,000 caterpillars for one clutch of little chickadees. And even for seed-eating birds, they don't feed their chicks seeds. It's like you don't give steak to an infant. So they need insect caterpillars and things like that to feed their chicks, even though those chicks will grow up to be seed eaters. So thank you. I appreciate everybody's attention and your questions. And so if there's not anything else.
Thank you very much, Phil. And from everyone here at the Wyncote Audubon Society, we really appreciate you taking your Friday night and presenting to us. Yeah, thank you, Phil. And I hope you guys were all inspired here on this Earth Day to take action this weekend in your own backyard or in your own community. So like I said, on behalf of the Wyncote Audubon Society, thank you, Phil, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Have a safe and happy weekend and happy Earth Day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.